who is a boss or colleague that maybe didn't make such a great first impression, and what did they do?
It actually shocked me. I still to this day, and this was many years ago, and to this day, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I was sitting in the
Tony, great to see you again. Thank you for taking the time to meet.
Grant. I really appreciate you taking the time to continue our conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you've had a very lengthy and impressive career. Can you tell people more about what you've done and then maybe your transition into coaching?
Yeah, before I started my executive coaching practice in 2019, as you pointed out, I was an executive at RBC, which is Canada's largest, financial institution. And I often say that throughout my career, I had 8 distinct careers within the
Okay.
organization. I worked in personal banking, business banking, wealth management, financial planning, insurance. I was in sales leadership. I started and ran businesses. But over time, what I came to really appreciate was my passion and love for coaching. And that was really the impetus for me starting the Competence Advantage.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Banking, it could be considered a field that's more focused on numbers, on finance, maybe not quite as much on human connection and communication. I know that's something that you really focus on.
You're right. Most people would look at, banking as being very numbers driven.
Mhm,
Fortunately, my career was more on the sales side, so leading teams, engaging with clients.
mhm. Okay.
So really, communication is really at the core of everything we did. Whether it was how we engage with people, whether it was how we listen, how we ask questions, and really build relationships, and that really translates into the way that you manage your team as well.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, yeah. And I've loved a lot of the communication and leadership stuff you share on LinkedIn. Something that really stands out was those 3 questions for building a good relationship in any workplace. Can you explain more about what those are and how you recommend people use them?
Yeah, it's something that we built as part of, our sales training, for lack of a better term. And
Hmm.
relationships start with a connection, that first impression. And
Hmm.
I'm a firm
Hmm.
believer that, we all, human nature, we judge. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but we make impressions when we first meet people.
Of
And so
course.
what I firmly believe is that we ask our subconsciously, we ask ourselves 3 questions about people when we first meet them. Now
Okay.
think about this, and we all do it. Think about this. You go to an Apple store to buy a new phone. You're talking to a real estate agent for the first time. You're talking to a server in a restaurant. Do I like you? Are you credible? And can you help me? Now, if I break those questions down a little bit, like is very subjective. I get that. But you also know when you meet somebody and you leave, you go, yeah, I kind of like that person. And you kind of get
Hmm.
a feeling.
Hmm.
Are
Hmm.
you credible? It really deals with how you communicate with confidence, how you engage people
Hmm. Hmm.
positively. And that really supports your credibility. And can you help me? And now, this, whether it is applying for a job or whether you're helping a client solve a problem, it's showing your ability to leverage your experiences, communicate your experiences, align with the needs of that individual or that company. So that's why I look at these 3 questions as the things that people subconsciously ask them about themselves. Again, whether it's in an interview or whether you're in the middle of a sales process or just meeting somebody for the first time.
I love that. It's kind of breaking down the process of relationship building in more of a scientific framework that really anyone can think about and understand.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So let's say there's a new leader or a new team member. They've just joined a company. They want to make the best impression possible. What advice would you have?
Yeah, it's a great question because joining a new team or a new company provides many opportunities for a first impression.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, having a plan and getting to know people in their roles is, to me, the great first step. And that's what I encourage people to do. Identify the people you want to meet, identify some great open questions that you want to ask them to learn about their job, the people on their team, what they do, and them personally. And then ask the question,
Hmm.
actively listen. And then I use the term peel the onion. And this is a term that is sometimes used in sales as part of the discovery process.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And what that means is that, often we ask a question and we take at face value the first answer. And we don't take the opportunity to, peel it back a little bit, learn a little bit more. Questions like, tell me a little bit more. That's interesting. Why? How did you come to that conclusion? What did you learn from that? What you'll really find, at least I do anyways, is that the
Mhm.
real value, the real learning is sometimes in that second or third layer. And so not only will you learn a true impact of the true value of the answer to that question, but you'll often learn a lot about the individual, and it really helps deepen the relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's not always the action, it's not always the interest, it's the motivation or the beliefs behind those actions that can lead to a much deeper connection with people.
Yeah, and it really is conversational. I think sometimes we go into a conversation looking to ask a couple of questions and we don't really listen because we're so focused on asking the next question. It's that
Very
active listening
true.
people talk about. But I'm
Yeah.
taking that one step further, which is to say, okay, not only active listening, but active listening includes digging a little deeper. And showing you're
Mhm.
interested as well is really a really important skill.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. A great phrase I've learned when it comes to networking and first relationships is focus more on being interested than being interesting.
Yeah, I'm actually delivering a workshop this Saturday at one of the universities up here, and it is one of the principles I use. It's a networking workshop, and
Mhm, mhm,
be interested versus interesting. And one of the things I often say to students and even professionals is that you're nervous going into these networking events. By being prepared and having these great open questions and peeling the onion, you're leading to a situation where the other person's probably doing 75% of the talking, which not only helps you gather more information, but it also reduces
mhm.
the stress on you because you're not going to be talking as much.
Very true. Very true. So yeah, you mentioned having questions prepared. Do you feel like people should prepare a whole series of questions or maybe just a first one or two and really try to ask follow-ups based on people's answers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there's a couple of things to that. One is in the context you're talking about it, where you're saying you're starting a new job and should ask some questions. I do encourage you create a list of questions that you want to ask pretty much across all of the group because you also want to gather information consistent. Now, it might be different if you're speaking to the SVP versus a manager level individual, but
Mhm.
I try to suggest that they ask the same questions, some about business and some about the individual. You don't want to make this all about just work. You want to get to know the
Mhm.
person,
Mhm.
about their career and their background a little bit. Um, I say go in with a list of questions, maybe 5 questions, but the goal is not necessarily to ask that fifth question. If you can
Mhm.
have a great conversation, peel the onion back and really dig deep on the first two, great. But I would probably be prepared, depending on the length of time, with somewhere between 3 and 5 questions. You should provide context around a question.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a really good question that you could ask, but if it's asked, it's like, where did that come from? And so, as
Mhm.
an
Mhm.
example, listen, Grant, thank you very much for taking 30 minutes of your time. I'm new to the organization, and what I'm really looking to do is gain an understanding of the people that we're working with, how leadership operates, learn a little bit about your business, and find a way that we can effectively work together and how I can best support you as your partner. So now I've laid out the context. And then
Yes.
the questions that I might ask were as broad as tell me a little bit about your career journey. How did you get into this role? I might ask a question after that of tell me a little bit about your job and your team. What are some of the biggest opportunities that you have, and what are some of the biggest challenges you face, either individually or as part of your team? So things like that would
Mhm.
kind of get the
Mhm.
questions going
Mhm.
because what you're doing is you're looking to really learn about them and their business with an opportunity both to, understand, but even potentially provide insights based on your experience.
That is awesome. Two things that really stand out to me about that context you just laid out. One, you show that you're grateful for their
Mhm.
time. That is something I have noticed universally. Good people value other people's time and they let them know that. I love that. And also, you clearly laid out this is the goal here is mutually beneficial. I want to learn more so I can help you more. That's fantastic. And also it was just what, maybe 3 or 4 sentences. It's not like you gave this 5 minute giant spiel about all your deepest desires and the process of joining the company. It's just it's 30 seconds letting them know, hey, I value you. I appreciate your time. I want to learn and I'm here to help. That's
Yeah, and
fantastic.
even when you're asking some of the individual questions, it may be as simple as a very short one sentence where you're explaining why you're asking the question. And again, you're not really necessarily explaining it. You're giving the context as to why you're asking the question, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so to me, that just removes that thought in the person's mind of hesitation. Maybe they don't know how to answer the question. So providing the context, not only telling them why, but giving them the context on which to answer the question. So it makes the conversation usually smoother as well.
That's a good point. Yeah, let them know kind of what type of answer you're looking
Yeah,
for. That can be very
exactly.
helpful.
Exactly.
And I like that you mentioned the personal questions. Maybe keep them mostly career oriented for the
Yeah.
first meeting, because sometimes people think personal questions like, okay, what are your hobbies? Like, what
Yeah.
do you do on a Saturday night? Maybe it's still about their career, it's still about work. It's just more about them as an individual as opposed to the organization or the team.
Sure. I mean, when I say personal, I'm not asking you, to your point, to reveal something really personal. But if you ask
Sure.
somebody about their career background, their career journey, their life journey, and you may hear things about their education and maybe where they grew up and where they went to school and some of their learnings. And again, peeling the onion back a little bit will make that very quasi business, quasi personal question allow you to take it to that next level down and really develop a
Mhm.
relationship and things that you can connect with that individual on.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. What's the opposite? So, what are some things you recommend avoiding or you should not do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because when I think about it as it relates to starting a new job or starting with a new company,
Hmm.
often a lack of confidence leads people to focus more on telling people about them and all the experience they have and all the great things they know.
Okay.
And what it does is it takes away the opportunity to learn about the business. Or even in some cases, they don't even engage people. They just want to get in and do the job. But what a great opportunity for that first, even couple of weeks, even a week, to spend some time with your key partners, your manager, people on your team. You know, that really to me sets the foundation for how successful you're going to be in the role.
Got it. So, really be there to ask, listen, and learn.
Absolutely.
Don't just spend the whole time talking about yourself or your background or what you want in the role. And also don't just immediately put your head down and get to work without validating that what you're doing is what they want and is what will bring the organization closer to its goals.
That's a great point. I mean, you were brought to the role for a reason. Trust the fact that you're very well qualified. So let's help you overcome that, belief that maybe you're not qualified for the role and focus on learning about the individuals, learning about the business, learning about the teams, and how you can leverage your experience to, synergistically make everything better.
Awesome. That sounds like great advice, Tony. So let's think of some examples. I'm sure you've seen both good and bad throughout your
Yeah.
multi-decade career.
Okay. Stop with the multi-decade.
Okay. I'll say throughout your very
No, I'm kidding.
lengthy,
I'm kidding.
impressive, and professional career.
Oh, Grant, I'm kidding, man. I'm just making fun.
Sure, sure. How about a boss or colleague that made a great first impression on you, really stood out, and that led to a solid relationship? What's an example of that, and maybe what did they do
Yeah.
to build that trust early on?
Yeah, you're right. I have, I was with RBC for over 30 years. So
Mhm, mhm.
I was fortunate to work with many great leaders and mentors over time. And so it does make it tough to pick one. But if I think about this, a good one was early in my career, I was appointed the community manager of Whitby, Ontario. So that's a small town east of Toronto. And I was reporting to a VP who had broad responsibilities for a broader geography. And one of my first responsibilities was hiring a manager for one of my branches. And so the individual I was hiring, or sorry, was interviewing at this time,
Mhm.
was probably located more closely to where my manager was, about 30 kilometers from me. So I asked if I could come to her building, and I did. And she was out. So I went into her office and I sat down, and I'm working there for a while. And I did the interview in the office. And I found out later that her executive assistant reached out to her during the day and she said, "Oh, Jenny, Tony's he's in your office and he's interviewing in your office. And I just want you to know." And her comment was, "That's great. I always hire people who aspire for my role." And what that really taught me there was about the
Mm.
leadership she showed, the support she showed, and really hierarchy wasn't for her an issue. This wasn't about, "Oh, you can't go in my office." It was, by all means, it's there. And she loved the fact or saw the fact that at some point I did want her job. Obviously it was many years away, but it
Hmm.
really showed me a lot about her leadership when she didn't care about the office. She doesn't think about hierarchy. It's like, by all means, use the office. So that to me set that just treating somebody that way, I thought was really positive, and it set the tone for a lot of my career.
That's awesome. She wants you to be as successful, if not more successful than her. And that's what a great leader should strive for. Build your followers up. Don't just protect yourself at the top.
Yeah, and if you think about it, by her saying that I hire people who aspire for my job, and if she supports that, what it really means is that she's going to provide you with opportunities, situations, coaching, feedback, constructive and
Hmm.
positive.
Going to be a growth environment. Yeah,
100% well said, a growth environment. So that to me helped me set those growth environments for my teams in the future.
that's fantastic. Really like that. How about the opposite? What's a boss? Who is a boss or colleague that maybe didn't make such a great first impression, and what did they do?
Well, this one actually is a bit of a good first impression and then something from a human nature perspective. So, you know, when I think about this question, I think about this senior director who joined our leadership team. So, reporting to the same senior vice president that I did.
Hmm.
And when this individual joined, they actually did a lot of what I mentioned earlier about reaching out, engaging people on the team, learning how to work with the SVP, understanding about our businesses, understanding how we could work together. The individual was doing a great job of that. And so we were talking, and towards the end of our conversation, he said to me, do you want to continue this conversation over lunch? Now we were having a great conversation.
Hmm.
We both
Hmm.
were pretty, hands are moving. It was engaging conversation, and so we went to lunch. And so we sit down in the restaurant, and we're continuing the conversation. And the server walked over, and as I'm looking to the server, he puts the hand up, doesn't even look, and says, "We're talking. Come back." And I looked up at the server and I said,
Okay.
just give us 2 minutes, okay? We're just in the middle of a heated conversation type of thing. And I smiled and he left. Now,
Hmm.
this told me a lot about this individual. We created a good first impression, but what it told me was they're very hierarchical. It also showed me how they treated people that they didn't view as their peers. And while we continued to
Hmm.
have a great working relationship throughout the time that we worked together, there was always that thought in the back of my mind, I got to be a little guarded because this is a very political individual. So I bring this up. I don't know if it necessarily answers your question, but if you're dealing with trust, and damaging relationships, everything started out great. We developed this
Hmm.
good, quick
Hmm.
relationship, but I noticed something about their style and their personality and their leadership style that really provided me with a level of concern.
Yeah, yeah. I would feel the same way if I was in your situation.
It actually shocked me. I still to this day, and this was many years ago, and to this day I feel
Hmm.
like I was sitting in the booth when the server walked up, and I can visualize it. It was that impactful on me.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wow. And it kind of the takeaway there, building trust, it's not just how you treat that individual, it's how you treat everyone around you that they see if you're talking that way to the custodian at the office, the receptionist, even if you're super respectful to the senior leadership, they'll probably still notice that. And
Well,
it's
yeah.
going to affect the way they feel about you.
Well, and to your point, as an extension of that, if you are really well known to the senior leadership and you're engaging them positively, but yet you don't have time for, the people that you don't see as your peers, or that more importantly,
Mhm.
that you don't believe that are going to help you in your career, that says a lot
Mhm.
about you. And that to me changes my view of that individual as a leader. And if I even think about it from the perspective of would I recommend other people work for them, I might, but I'll find a way without telling that story of maybe communicating things that they want to be aware of.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So moving on, Tony, where can people find you, learn more from you, learn more about your coaching?
Well, thanks for that. I think there's three ways. One is I am pretty active on LinkedIn. I write most days about leadership, confidence, and communication.
Hmm.
And so you can find me on LinkedIn. I have a website. The URL for my business is the Confidence Advantage. My URL for
Hmm.
my website is communicatingconfidence.com. And I have a YouTube channel for the Confidence Advantage that has about 19 or 20 videos, and I keep on adding to them and changing them over time. But again, focused on leadership, building out your career, communication, and confidence.
Love that. Love that. You definitely have the experience. You got a relatively unique niche. There are still, though, some other confidence communication coaches out there. What do you feel makes you special? What's unique about Tony Bagnatto as a coach?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's an interesting question because you're right. There are a lot of leadership coaches, executive coaches, career coaches out there,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I kind of summarize it in my headline of my LinkedIn profile. I'm an executive coach who was an executive. And I phrase it that way because I
Hmm.
believe that makes me different from the perspective that I've traveled the journey that my clients aspire to, and that I can help them understand, what is truly valued and needed to be as successful, as they can at senior levels. And so having traveled that journey to me is, I believe, what makes me unique.
Absolutely. You've really been there. You've been in their shoes. You know what it's like. And I'm sure that can just give you a level of empathy and wisdom answering their questions that a lot of the people who are just doing it from theory wouldn't have.
Yeah, if I think about some of the key questions that I get from clients or prospective clients, a lot of them sound like this. What is said when I'm not in the room? And what they mean by that is that
Mm.
what are executives talking about? How if I'm going to go present to them, how do I present in an impactful way? How is that presentation to that audience different from then say presenting to my team? Things like that. Understanding
Mm.
what is talked about in the room and how to engage leaders in a way that's most impactful. They're two common things that come up.
Yeah. And as someone who's never been an executive, I would have no idea how to answer that. But I'm sure you've been in that room countless times, so you could give a much more accurate insight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Tony, I will put all of your links below. Highly recommend anyone watching this go follow Tony. Love the stuff he posts. He's just a great guy to be connected with and learn from. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Grant, listen, thanks for the invite. And as always, really enjoy talking to you. Thank you.